March 11th, 2024. This is episode 59 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. Tonight, Mike Koomar and I, Sean Vowells, will go over an ACC Conference Tournament preview. We'll hit on the All-Conference Awards that came out today. And then we'll hit a little bit more national news, bracketology-wise, what certain ACC teams have to do to hear their name called. So, Mike, we're going to start off with the location of this tournament. It's going to be played at the Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C., the first time that's happened there. No schools in the ACC nearby. What do you think of this?
Yeah, certainly a very curious place here. It does kind of merge the Northeastern teams with the Southeastern teams in the ACC. Usually they play in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is a popular one because of the North Carolina teams there. But this is certainly an audible call. I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense, to be honest. But it is unique. You are going to get probably a little bit more representation for teams like Pitt and Syracuse. And then you certainly have a lot of Notre Dame folk that live in the Washington, D.C. area. So I do still think it's a very interesting call when your biggest fan bases are all in the Carolinas.
Yeah, I think we'll see, what kind of crowds they're going to get. And the tournament starts tomorrow, which is why we're leading off with this one, Mike. We're going to hit a bunch of them here over the next couple days. But this tournament starts tomorrow, and none of those teams are really playing for anything, barring a 5-day and five wins in 5 days Kemba Walker type run. So we'll see how those crowds are. The Boston colleges of the world, not very close to the nation's capital and playing a meaningless game. I think we could see some tough crowds in D.C. early on, but Clemson, Wake, Duke, Carolina, obviously not as close to the venue as it usually is in Greensboro, but still close enough. Virginia, too, pretty close. So I think by at least, Thursday when all the double bye teams come in, I think we're going to see some good crowds. And that's really kind of what conference tournaments are all about. You got to fill up the seats in the arena. And it's an NBA, NHL-style arena. So there's plenty of seats. And Georgetown doesn't quite fill up that building every time either. So be sure to, from the conference's point of view, they just want to get people in there, and we'll see what happens. I think they've got a shot. Mike, we're going to start off with our all-conference awards, and I'm going to throw them up on the screen for the YouTube listeners. Spotify listeners are just going to have to hang in there with us. I like how each team has 5 players on it. Now, some of the other conferences have 8, 10, 6. I'm a fan of the first team having 5 players, and the ACC did it pretty normally. The 5 biggest points getters, number 1 being R.J. Davis. He got the Player of the Year. Mike, anything to add on R.J. Davis?
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal year. I think this was the right call. A lot of people wanted Kyle Filipkowski to get that award. P.J. Hall was also super close in the points. All 3 of those, they were neck and neck. But R.J. Davis certainly deserving. And quite a turnaround season from last year where things really he did not perform up to his abilities.
Yeah, he's likely to get a first-team All-American shout, too, which is very impressive for him. They've sort of flushed last year. It's March time, and obviously they'll be judged about what happens next week and in the NCAA tournament. But talk about flushing a bad year. I don't know if you could have done it as well as North Carolina has here. Let's hang in there for a second.
No kidding.
Zoom on the YouTube froze. Okay, we're back. P.J. Hall and Kyle Filipkowski, like Mike mentioned, second and third place in the votes. And then we have Hunter Salas from Wake Forest, who's been their guy, getting the 4th place, and then Blake Hinson rounding out the first team. I like how five different teams are represented in this team, and anything to add on those two before we move on to the second team?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of names that I was kind of surprised they weren't on the first team line. But with that being said, it's very unique that we have 5 different schools represented by the 5 players on the first team All-ACC, Sean. So I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, me too. The second team, Mike, the 6th place vote getter is Armando Bacot. He's kind of taken a back seat this year. His stats are not as good as they have been in the past, but he still had a very good season for the Heels. He gets there with Reese Beekman, the two-way player for Virginia. He also got Defensive Player of the Year. Judah Mintz from Syracuse, the offensive threat. Norchad Omier from Miami, and Quentin Post from second team. Any shocks here?
Yeah, I think they did a really good job putting Armando Bacot as the second team player. Great player, but the stats just weren't there, and his production hasn't been as good as it has been the last couple years. With that being said, I would have really liked to see Quentin Post a little bit further up in the ACC Player of the Year rankings. He rounded out the bottom of the second team, and I thought that he could have even been a first team player.
Yeah, I actually put him on the first team preseason all conference team, and um,
Yeah.
he had a great season. He's a really good player. I'm surprised he's not getting more NBA draft looks with his ability to shoot the three at 40% at 7 feet tall. Um,
Yeah,
but
I think it just really has to do with playing at Boston College, not a big market team in the ACC, and not a really good team in general. But he's a phenomenal player.
I'm a little bit surprised that Norchad Omier got in here. Miami, Mike, is the 14 seed or 13 seed in this tournament.
Yeah,
Obviously, tough season for the Hurricanes. Great season last year, though. They made the Final Four, but I was a little bit surprised to see him that high. We'll go down to the third team, Mike. 5 more players. DJ Horn from NC State, Harrison Ingram from North Carolina, Jeremy Roach from Duke. The freshman of the year in the conference, Marcus Burton, and Sean Padula from Virginia Tech. I feel like, you see the viewers can see the honorable mentions underneath. Not a lot separating those third teamers. And typically, Mike, in these conferences, the third teamers are the second or third best player on the good teams or the best player on the bad teams, and it's not much different here.
yeah. I will say one guy that I really thought could have been second team if not definitely third team, who ended up with his honorable mention was Drew Gerard III with Clemson. I think he's been averaging 18 points a game in the last 10 games. He's been playing phenomenal basketball. Really good 3-point shooter and quite a turnaround year. He kind of underperformed during his time at Syracuse, but he's really turned it around. And I definitely think he deserved more recognition than being honorable mention.
Yeah, he's definitely, you see the other honorable mentions there, but he's definitely a player who kind of had some empty stats. People were saying at Syracuse all those years, and he's done the same thing now on a team that is, pretty good, 6 seed range for Clemson. You've got R.J. Davis getting the Player of the Year, like I said. Reese Beekman, Player of the Year. Marcus Burton, Rookie of the Year. Most Improved Player. Ian Shefflin from Clemson. Big improvement from him alongside P.J. Hall being that 1-2
Yeah.
punch down there for the Tigers.
Yeah, I mean it's really cool to see. Clemson is a legitimate team this year. They definitely struggled last year, but they are back and they're for real this year. And coach there is going to get, if not a raise, he'll certainly be getting a contract extension pretty soon.
Yeah, we've been talking about Brownell, Mike, over the years being very, very close to losing his job. One of those, a couple
Yeah,
coaches in this conference. I think you can say the same thing about Jeff Capel at Pitt too. Like kind of all right, you
very close.
gotta do something this year. Got to do something this year. They have,
Did
and
it?
this wasn't the year for Brad Brownell where that was the case, but he's got a really good team now, and they're gonna look to do some damage. We got Ishmael Leggett from Pitt being the sixth man of the year, and then let's see if there's. I think that's all the awards. Is there not a coach of the year on here?
Yeah, Hubert Davis.
Hubert Davis.
Uh,
Okay.
runaway win for Hubert Davis. Next closest was Jeff Cape, 4 times fewer votes as he did, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Hubert Davis had a pretty terrible year, and even he was going on to the hot seat coming into the year if they didn't perform this year. But North Carolina more than performed, and they took care of business. Interesting for me, Sean, was Micah Shrewsbury, the Notre Dame head coach, finished fourth in the Coach of the Year rankings. Notre Dame had a pretty bad year, so certainly surprising.
Yeah,
They played well coming down the stretch, but still.
they definitely turned it around come ACC play, Mike. On the analytical site Bart Torvik,
Yeah.
if you can sort by, the time and this is loading up here for a second. I'm gonna take a look, but you can sort like last 2 weeks, last month, last all that, and Notre Dame has improved better than any team has in the country in that time.
Yeah.
Since February 1st, they're in the top 80 in the country, and they're very, very good at defense. They've kind of always done that, but now
Yeah.
they're scoring the ball a little bit. So I would expect
I mean,
Notre Dame to be a threat next year with all their
Yeah.
young players being a little bit older.
absolutely. That's going to be a fun team next year.
So, Mike, we're going to get into the tournament bracket now, and unfortunately, this is the only tournament preview bracket that I will not have loaded up already. I can search for it really quickly, but I've got all the other ones. Let's see real quick. We've got those Tuesday teams, like I said, Mike. Not a whole lot to play for them. Um, you've got a couple of. You've got the first game here being between Micah Shrewsbury's Fighting Irish and Georgia Tech, the team that beats all the ranked teams. You've got NC State and Louisville. Both of those teams will most likely have openings next year. And then you've got Boston College and Miami in the third game tomorrow night. Anything to add on those games that we should look out for?
I think you talked a little bit about there, Sean. Watch out for Georgia Tech. They have 4 quad 1 wins this year. Not many teams have more quad 1 wins than Georgia Tech does, despite them having, I believe, a 14-17 record. So the Yellow Jackets are kind of weird. They're very streaky, but who knows? I think they could totally get a couple games in this tournament. You look at if they can beat Notre Dame, they got Wake Forest and Pitt. I'm not saying they will, but I think they could 100% make a run to the semifinals of this tournament.
All right, Mike. So I got the bracket up there. Some on the fly editing. I forgot. Sorry about that. So, Mike, we're back. We're talking about Virginia on the bubble. They might need to beat Clemson, and Clemson's a good team in the tournament. It might line up for that to be a sort of playing game for the Cavaliers.
I think it totally does, Sean. You look at how poorly Virginia has done in some games, and especially coming down the stretch, a lot of concerns for Tony Bennett's squad. I do think that they have to beat Clemson. They have to get to the semifinals in order to get into this tournament. I think there are a lot of ACC teams that are kind of doing playing games. Clemson, although they got the 6th seed in the ACC, I think they're secure right now. Syracuse has to keep winning to survive. Wake Forest, I think, has to grab at least one game, if not two. And Pitt, I think, does need to win as well.
Yeah, the Syracuse probably needs to win a bunch of games.
Yeah.
Wake Forest and Pitt, maybe one of those teams is likely going to be in the semifinals. I like Pitt's numbers a lot more than other people. I have them as my third team out. They have a great record in neutral and road games, and if you win these, there's there's a strength of your resume getting even
There's more
better.
weight. Yeah.
And Wake Forest is a team that actually matters if you beat them. I think they're ahead of Wake Forest already, so to beat them might be enough, honestly, with the way that the bubble's shaking out, and you might have some bid. We keep talking about bid Steelers, Mike, in these other conferences like Richmond and South Florida, but they've won their conference. They've won the regular season.
Yeah.
That is, so they're being projected into the field right now. So if Dayton or FAU win their tournaments, which they're definitely capable of doing, we might have the opposite of a bid steal. We might have a bid open. And I feel like Pitt might just sneak in there. They beat Duke at Cameron Indoor. They have beaten all of the teams around them in the ACC. I think Pitt has a sneaky optimism where if they can beat Wake Forest, they might find themselves in the big dance.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what's interesting, Sean, is right now with ACC, you've only, from my estimates, have 3 teams that are locks. I look at Duke, North Carolina, Clemson as the only teams that are really locked in. I think Pitt, they could get in, but I think they certainly need to win against Wake Forest. I think Wake Forest certainly needs to win against Pitt. And UVA is teetering towards the bubble. We all know what Syracuse needs to do. So kind of an interesting setup here in the ACC where they might not get a lot of teams in the tournament this year.
Yeah, I mean, with two of the bubble teams playing each other, maybe the winner of that game gets in. But 3 locks at this point.
Yeah.
There's a real chance there could be 3 teams in the tournament from the ACC, and that's bad news for them. But they do have 2 teams who are pretty highly ranked, and then another team that's pretty safe as well. But Mike, we'll move on to who we think's going to win this tournament. Is anything else but a UNC Duke round 3, the championship game?
I kind of like Clemson. Do I like them enough, though? I don't. I think we're going to get Duke, North Carolina, part 3. However, I do think you got to watch out for the Clemson Tigers. I think they could steal one against kind of a weak Duke team, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's lucky for Clemson that they did not fall on the same side as Carolina, because they did go into Carolina 2 days after Carolina beat Duke and kind of surprised them. And there's no way the Tar Heels would let that happen again. So they won't. They were very close to winning Cameron Indoor too. Very home crowd friendly call at the end of that game. So I think Clemson's definitely they're going to be favorites against Virginia if that game happens, and I think they should win that game against the Cavaliers.
And one thing too, Sean, that I would check out is I certainly think that UNC in one of their first 2 games is going to get their hands full, and they're going to have to win this game coming down the stretch. Whether that's their quarterfinal game with the winner against Virginia Tech and Florida State, or it's a game against Pitt or Wake Forest. I think they're going to be going off of a little bit of a high, beating Duke and Cameron and winning their regular season conference. Watch out for UNC early, but I think if they can get to the championship, they'll lock it up.
I also think, Mike, this doesn't mean a whole lot to North Carolina. Now they are fighting for that last number. They are fighting for their last number 1 seed, but being the 2 seed in the East region might be better for them than going to Los Angeles as the 1 seed, because likely Arizona as the 2 seed, as the top 2 seed, will be there as well, and you'll be playing a road game essentially so close to Arizona, and versus a 2 seed in the East or even the Midwest is pretty close to North Carolina and Michigan. So now if you win it all, you're probably going to get the 1 seed the way that it's shaken out, or maybe Tennessee jumps you if they win their tournament, but still a lot to go left. We'll take a look at my bracketology. Like I said, UNC the last 1 seed. I've got Duke as the top 3 seed right now in the East region up there in Boston. Clemson is the 3rd, 6th seed in the South region. And then, Mike, I have Virginia as my 2nd team out and Pitt as my 3rd team out, Wake Forest as, more than that. So any comments on the ACC's bracketology situation before we get into our predictions?
Yeah, I mean, right now, Sean, you're not too bullish on the ACC, and nor am I. They're going to have to win some games coming down the stretch. I think if Wake Forest can find a way to beat Pitt and Carolina, they're certainly in the tournament, but a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, the reason why Wake is being held back is because they've done almost nothing away from home. Well, wins in this tournament would be considered away from home, so that would certainly help the Demon Deacons' cause. You probably do need at least, you do need 2 wins to feel happy, to feel good about yourself, because you're a bit off the pace right now. But Mike, we'll wrap up this ACC preview. Who do you think's cutting down the nets when it's all said and done?
Give me Carolina. I'm going to take the full sweep on this one. Sweep Duke for the year. Sweep the ACCs.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. They're the best team in the league. They're the number 1 seed for a reason. And, they might get surprised early on, but they're not going to face a team that can match them physically or talent-wise or athletic-wise until the championship game at the earliest. And I think they get the job done. They've beat Duke pretty handily 2 times in a row. There's no reason why that can't become a 3rd. So, Mike, that's all we have for them in this ACC preview. There's another link for the Big 12 preview. We'll take a quick break, and we'll head over there in a minute. But thank you, everybody, for tuning into the ACC Tournament. It starts tomorrow in Washington, D.C.